On this episode of the Home Studio Hangout, we have my friend Chris Davis, producer and guitarist for Texas in July and The Ghost Inside. We talked to Chris about his early days in bands, joining both Texas in July and The Ghost Inside, how he decided to start producing other bands, and why The Ghost Inside has been working with producer Dan Braunstein. I love Chris, and I've been trying to get him on this podcast for a very long time, so once again, thank you, Chris, for joining, and I hope you, the listener, will enjoy our conversation with Chris Davis.
Welcome to the Home Studio Hangout podcast, where we explore what it's like building, running, and working out of a home studio with your hosts, Joshua Matotek, Andrew Simmons, and many guests in different areas of the music industry.
Welcome back to the Home Studio Hangout podcast. I'm your host, Drew, here with my co-host, Josh. Say hi to the people, Josh.
Hello.
Hello. I'm glad that you are back. You've missed a couple episodes.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm bad.
It's okay. You got, hey man, when Lee calls and it's work, you got to go. I understand.
I know.
But I'm glad you're back with us. Today we have my friend and yours, hopefully, and everybody's father who've left and finally came back with the milk, Mr. Chris Davis himself.
It is I have returned, and I have the milk and cigarettes.
Yeah.
We're here.
I have been legitimately trying to make this happen for a very long time, and neither of us have been. It's not been the right time for either of us. So we caught you at the best time, which is post stuff. So
Yes.
Yeah.
It's been a busy year. I apologize. I've had to reschedule on you at least once or twice now. So I apologize. Thank you for hanging in there with me. We're doing it.
We're doing the thing, man. I say, why don't you tell the people who don't know, for some reason they don't know who you are.
That's probably a lot of them, and for good reason.
It could be. We do end up getting a lot of like pop and hip hop guys on here too. So like our breadth is pretty wild. Tell them who you are, what you do, and a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I play guitar in the bands The Ghost Inside and Texas in July. The Ghost Inside being my main thing that I do. Texas in July has become more of like a side project because everybody's too busy with being adults and other projects and jobs and things of that sort. But yeah, so I tour full time playing guitar in the band. And it's basically what I've been doing for, Jesus, how long now? I started touring full time in 2010. How many years is that? Way too many. 13 years.
13 years.
That's a long time.
It's a long time.
Yeah. And it started before that even. I started playing shows and actively kind of pursuing this. I guess you can call it a job. Sometimes it feels like a job. Sometimes it just feels like every day is Friday. But
yeah,
I started playing shows when I was like 11 years old, and I kind of never really had any other aspirations in life. You know, like nothing else. Like I played baseball. Played sports. I skateboarded. Like all the normal childhood stuff that for like 5 minutes felt like, maybe I'll try to be a professional baseball player. Maybe. Yep. And then I started playing in bands. I was like, nope. This is it. This is the one. Yeah. This is what I do.
Every kid goes through that like band skateboard phase, and they're like, I either want to be in a band or I want to be a pro skateboarder.
Yes, and then my skateboarding thing stopped when I started playing in a band because I was like, if I keep falling, I'm gonna break one of these things that are very important to doing the other things. So I have to stop all the dumb shit now. So that put an end to the skateboarding for me pretty early on.
For sure. Well, you had the hair to go with it back then too.
I did, and thank God I got rid of that shit. Why did anybody tell me to cut my hair sooner? What the hell, man?
No, was it that bad?
It was long. It was like
really
halfway
long.
Down my back.
It was really long. Honestly, if you Google Texas in July and you look at the images,
nobody should do that. Nobody should do that. Don't do that.
If you look at the images, you'll see him with like super long hair. If you just look at all the images, it's great.
It's bad, man. Yeah, it was long for a long time, and then Texas did 2 weeks of Warped Tour in 2013, and I was like, that's it. I've had enough.
Oh, God.
I have to get this shit off my head, and I've never looked back, thank God.
Warped Tour, that's how Warped Tour breaks you.
It legitimately is. Kevin Lyman is running a scheme to get people to shave their heads. That's what was happening.
That's what it was. He's just running his scheme to keep all of the hair of every long-haired metal band. Because you notice after a band plays Warped Tour, their hair is significantly shorter directly after.
Yeah, it's because they've spent the entire summer with heat stroke playing on blacktops when it's 125 degrees outside. Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
what else are they going to
do? That's true. With just thousands and thousands and thousands of people just crammed into tiny spaces.
Yes.
How was Warped Tour?
The 2 weeks. So our experience, I feel like, is not the normal Warped Tour experience, and I feel really bummed that I never got to do the full Warped Tour,
full run.
Yeah, so Texas only did 2 weeks of it, and we did it in a van and trailer, which is like not how. I mean, plenty of bands do that also.
That's how Fit did it, and I mean, Tuck
Fit did it that way.
Silent Planet did it.
Yeah, that's how Planet's done it. A lot of the bands that
Train's done it. Like a lot of the bands that we're
friends with did it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like, that's not how that tour is routed. It's not, it's routed for a bus, you know, like drives are minimum of like 8 to 10 hours. Like it's routed for a bus. So, and you're not like, there's no place for fucking, 50, 60 bands to hang out all day. So most bands who have buses hang out in their bus. When you're in a van, you've got such limited space to live in.
You start like becoming friends with the people who do have buses.
Sure. And so we got very fortunate that a ton of our friends were on the tour that summer. So we would go hang out in August Burns Red's bus, for example. Like if we really needed space, like there were like Moths to Flames is on the tour, we'd go hang out with them.
Yeah.
Like there were places for us to go, but the reality is like the only space that was ours was our van. And so when you've got 5 guys in your band, a sound guy, a driver, and a merch guy, like that space gets eaten up really quick.
That's zero space, actually.
Yes, it was not fun. And then it got even worse because the guy who was driving us, like the second or third night of the tour, was pulling away from a gas pump really fast for some reason, clipped the wheel well of our trailer and bent the axle on our trailer, and like we were driving like a day or two later and the tire just blew off and like completely took the completely ruined the entire axle. So we had to leave behind the trailer in the middle of nowhere. I don't even remember what state we were in, but we finished the last like week and a half of the tour with our van, the bottom bunk in our van stuffed with all of our merch for the tour, and then a U-Haul cargo van filled with all of our gear. So we were driving 2 vans for a week and a half on Warped Tour, 8 to 10 hours every night. And if you drove the U-Haul, you had to get to the venue in the morning and sleep sitting straight up in the driver's seat of the U-Haul van. It was fucking miserable. I'm glad we did it. It's really, I like it. That was a crazy bucket list thing for me to even get an offer to do Warped Tour. I had played the local date a couple times with my local band, winning like the Ernie Ball Battle of the Band situation. Yeah. Getting an offer for the tour is that's like a crazy bucket list thing
the goal
for any band in our world. Right.
Yeah.
Like really in that time period that Warped Tour was running, like there was no bigger thing for you to do in the summer. So getting the offer was awesome. How we had to do the tour because we just weren't making enough money to justify a bus was fucking miserable. So I'm glad we did it. I would not do it that way ever again though.
Yeah.
Was it like near, because you guys are from like East Coast area in general when you were in Texas. Everybody was kind of like East Coast from Pennsylvania down to you. You were the
Maryland.
Maryland area. Yeah.
Yep, and that was JT's first tour, so he was also in Maryland with me. So it was Maryland and Pennsylvania at that point. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. Where was the tour route though? Was it like in the area or was it like somewhere totally different?
I think we started in Florida, if I remember correctly, but it was like Florida, and then we did Atlanta, maybe.
So you got to do the fun ones,
and then it ended in Texas. So we did like the southeast out to Texas, and it ended in Texas. So hot and then hotter.
Yeah. But you got to do a lot of the bigger ones and probably a lot of the easier drives because the southeast is like the easiest drive. Because I mean, at least from what people that I have talked to about that kind of stuff, namely like Tuck and the other Ryan from Fit and like some of the other dudes that I know that have done in those circles, they're all like the Southeast is the easiest because the drives are generally the shortest.
That is true. You just run into like Florida's a giant state. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah,
like,
it's bigger than you think it is.
Right. So
Josh
you can
found that
drive
out.
forever in Florida depending on what parts you're driving to. But for the
Yeah.
most part, it's not terrible. And then Texas is the same way. Texas is fucking gigantic. So
Yeah.
yeah, they can be far, but luckily I don't think we had anything that was like super, super crazy. We had a couple that were pretty far, but nothing that was like, we're gonna die trying to make this drive. You know what I mean?
Like a 14-hour drive.
Yeah, having to do a 14 hours overnight, which would probably I can't think of a time that it would ever happen on tour, but it would.
Yeah.
It has
on a Warped Tour situation. I'm sure that existed somewhere on the West Coast because everything on the West Coast is so spread out.
Yeah,
I wouldn't doubt it. But yeah, 8 to 10 hours was, you could pretty much count on that.
Yeah, that's funny. So you were in Texas. What was the transition from Texas to TGI, and how did that happen?
Yeah, so I joined Texas in July at the end of 2010, like right before the band went full time touring. Because most of the guys were still in high school prior to that.
What record? It's probably easy to signify from records for people.
Yeah, so the band was doing like the final tours on the record I Am, and then literally like 3 weeks after my first tour with the band, we went into the studio to record One Reality, which is our first record on Equal Vision.
Gotcha.
And so, yeah, I was full time in that band from that point on, and basically till the band broke up, which was in 2015. We had gone through a couple of member changes. We thought we finally found our footing again, and then we were losing a guitar player, and our like drummer started having some heart issues, and we thought that maybe he wasn't going to be able to tour or play drums anymore, and just felt like the universe is like, you guys need to chill out, to take it easy. And so we were like, it's best to just like step away now instead of trying to keep pushing through and potentially ending up like in a really bad place. Like let's just call it a day now, quit while we're ahead, and then we'll be all good. But in that last year, we made that decision at the end of 2014 that we were going to do a couple more tours in 2015, and we were going to call it quits at the end of 2015. And so knowing that, going into 2015, I was open to the idea of doing some other stuff to fill my time. I was already talking about getting like a job for the first time in 5 years. Like I'd been touring so much, I couldn't have a job when I was home. I just didn't have the time. Or no job would have given me the time off to go on tour. You know what I mean? Like it's very rare to find a job that'll let you leave 9 to 10 months out of the year and still have a spot for you when you get home. So for the first time I was like, well,
remote.
Right. And
which wasn't really a thing then. So
right. Which is crazy to think about because it really wasn't that long ago, but really technology has like made such crazy leaps and bounds since then, since like 2015, that more of those options are available to us now. They just didn't exist back then.
Yeah.
So I got a job at Guitar Center. I worked at Guitar Center for a couple months. But also something that happened at the end of 2014 was I saw the Ghost Inside here in Baltimore. They were doing a co-headline tour with Every Time I Die. And Baltimore was the second to last day of the tour. And I was just hanging out with the guys in the green room because Texas had toured with them almost exactly a year prior. So I knew the guys already. I went to hang out with them. And I believe it was Jim or Andrew mentioned that the next day, the last day of the tour, was going to be Aaron, the original guitar player's last show with the band, that he was leaving the band. And I just casually tossed out there, I was like, I don't know what plans you guys have in place. Maybe you have, someone to take the spot. But if you don't, like Texas is going to be slowing down pretty significantly next year. Like we're going to do a handful more tours, but the band's going to be done by the end of the year. And I would love to just go out and just do anything you guys might need help with. I was trying to let them know that I was available, but I also didn't want to be too pushy. So I was like, if you got a guy, totally cool. If not, and you just need somebody to like fill in a couple shows until you figure out what you're going to do. Like I'm totally down to do whatever. And maybe a month, 2 months later, Jim called me and was like, hey, if you were serious, we've got a couple tours. We'd love to have you on. And I kind of just became the guy from there. Just pretty awesome. So yeah, I spent most of 2015 doing double duty between the Ghost Inside and Texas in July. I did 2 Ghost Inside tours in the spring, did a US tour and straight into a European tour, came home for about 2 days, and then went out and did a North American tour with Texas in July. Went home for like 3 weeks, went back to Europe with the Ghost Inside for festivals, stayed in Europe for 3 days at the end of that by myself, waited for Texas to come over and did the farewell tour in Europe with Texas. And so that year, all the way up until we got the Ghost Inside got in our accident in November of that year, I was on tour almost the entire year. Like I only spent like 2 or 3 weeks total at home from the beginning of the year till the point that we got in the accident. That was the most busy I've ever been in my entire life, but also one of the most exciting times in my life. It was really cool to get to bounce between both bands within a matter of days and weeks and stuff. It was super cool.
That's kind of like a guitarist dream.
Wild.
That's kind of like the guitarist's dream, right? It's like I have these 2 awesome bands that I'm playing in, and I'm touring quite literally at that point the world, because you're just hopping around, and you maybe hit like a Aussie festival or something around. I don't know if they were doing them then, but something like that around there. And so you're just quite literally just world traveler hopping.
Pretty fucking spoiled, if I'm being honest. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was awesome. I appreciated it back then, but especially looking back on it now, it's like it was a really awesome opportunity to be able to get to do both at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And then accident happens, which kind of halts everything.
Mm-hmm.
Which you can give a TLDR on the accident, but I think you guys even put together like a thing on the accident, like a whole like mini doc kind of thing on YouTube if people want to check out like a detail information and like more stuff, but you can give kind of an overview of it.
Yeah. The TLDR is that we were on the Ghost Inside was on a tour called the Locals Only Tour, which was a last minute thing we put together because another tour fell through. But essentially the concept was we were just going to go to all of these towns, and instead of bringing a tour package with us, we were just going to have local support just to give an opportunity to local bands to play a show that may or may not be, slightly bigger than a normal local show they would play. Trying to give back to the scenes that even give us the opportunity to go out and do stuff. And so towards the end of that tour, we were driving from Lubbock, Texas to an off day in New Mexico, and our tour bus was in a head-on collision with a semi. And as you can imagine, it was not very awesome for anybody involved. And it greatly halted everything in everybody's lives. We didn't play any more shows for almost 4 years after that. And so, it forced us to kind of figure out who we were as people outside of being like Chris from the Ghost Inside, Vigil from the Ghost Inside. Like we had to, it forced us to slow down for a minute, focus on just recovering and being healthy, but also like the uncertainty of the future of the band kind of forced all of us to figure out what other things we like to do in life as well.
Yeah, everybody kind of got into something really, really cool, right? Like Vigil got super into streaming.
Yeah, so Vigil was always like the gamer guy, but he got really, really heavily into Twitch, and he like has a really awesome community that are like regulars that go to his Twitch streams. That now that we're back to playing shows, will like plan meetups together and come to the shows together, and it's like I don't know. He created a really cool community through his stream, so that was his thing. Jim went out and tour managed a couple bands. Zach and Andrew were the most injured, so they didn't really get to dive into too much. Zach since then has gotten really into fitness, and so that's kind of been his thing.
I noticed him getting much more buff, bro. He's shredded.
Yeah, he's a beast. And then Andrew he started a couple other like solo music projects, and he's done some ghostwriting for some other bands and stuff too. So that was kind of his distraction from all the other stuff going on. And then
becoming more of a producer and an engineer and like a songwriter. That is where I started hearing of Andrew more in like the broader sense of like the
Did we lose him?
heavy music stuff.
We lost him.
He's
He
gone.
looks like he just saw a ghost.
Josh,
He gone.
I'm screenshotting this.
there he is.
Oh, he's back.
There he is.
Can't screenshot it.
But yeah, it was
Oh.
exactly that. He used the time to. He was always the writer guy in all of his bands up until he joined the Ghost Inside. Because Aaron was more the writer guy, but he was in a band called For the Fallen Dreams prior to the Ghost Inside, and he wrote basically everything for the two records that he was a part of.
He wrote one of my favorite melodic metalcore records.
Changes?
When did he?
Yeah. Changes
Wow.
is one of my favorite of that era melodic metalcore records. He essentially, I would argue that he single-handedly started like 7 bands. With that sound.
There were so many bands that were copying what Andrew was doing. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, he started that band in high school, I believe, with their guitar player Jim Hawking, and Andrew was like the main songwriter for both Changes and Relentless, the one that came right after that, and then he left the band during the Relentless cycle.
I feel like anytime I see drummers writing the music, it's always really, really cool. It's always like really cool. That makes a lot of sense.
He is disgustingly. He's one of those guys that's just good at everything he tries to do. So he's like, he's good at video games. He's good at mixing. He's good at writing. He also has a very good eye with fashion. He's also he helped kind of do a bunch of the editing for our something people will see in the future, a music video that people will see in the future. Like him and Jim kind of took up the directing and like the visual concept of that. Like he is a multi-talented guy, and like I said, he's the kind of guy who's just good at everything he does. To a frustrating level. It's like, chill, dude. You're making the rest of us look like we can't do shit. Chill out.
That's super crazy. Yeah, I had no clue because the first time like I ever saw him like play like guitar, like anything other than drums, was on Instagram after the accident, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like he's like picking up guitar and stuff. And I was like, and I'm like hearing him play, and I was like, I don't think he's just picking up guitar. I feel like this has been a thing for a while, and like I just didn't know. You know?
And I think that if you asked him, he'd probably even consider himself a guitar player first, drummer second. Like I know that he likes playing guitar more.
Yeah. It's funny how that works out. I feel like a lot of times everyone kind of like thinks that like I'm the guitar guy, but like I am way better at drums, and I will always consider myself like a drummer first. And it's just the fact that like it's very rare that like anyone needs like live drums tracked or anything. Like I don't even have a kit right now, but it's just kind of funny how that works. I feel like oftentimes people like whenever they're in like some form of a like the public eye, like not everybody sees like exactly what they should probably be seeing, and it's because of other factors, whether they're in a band playing this instrument or they're a music producer, and so people are more focused on the production or whatever. It's I don't know, it's just cool seeing like what people's little nerd talents are,
And the same thing kind of happened to you, didn't it, Chris? So you kind of got into studio, and Vigil kind of got you into Twitch and during the pandemic and stuff. And what kind of happened? What was your trajectory there? You want to give people kind of that?
So the studio stuff kind of happened by accident. I mean, I think probably and if I had to guess, because I don't really know how either of you got into it, but I would almost guarantee, since you guys are band guys yourselves, that it probably is pretty similar to me, that I got Logic to start writing songs on my own for my old local band, because I was the main songwriter, and I got really tired of trying to write in a room with everybody and having it be kind of chaotic and not having the ideas come out the way that I was hearing them in my head. Even if everybody had a chance to put in their own input later, I wanted the initial idea to be fully fleshed out the way I was hearing it in my head. So I bought Logic, and I figured out how, and I bought Drum Kit from Hell, and I had one of those old little Line 6 like red little lima bean pod things. And I figured out how to program drums, and I started doing it just so I could write on my own, just so I could get out the ideas that were stuck in my head, and then present them to my band, and then we would work on them together from there. And from there, it started turning into, man, these sound like shit. Let me figure out how to like make these a little bit more listenable. And then it was, oh, that's kind of fun. Oh, well, now my friend has an idea he wants to record. Well, yeah, come over. We'll record your idea. Oh, that was really fun working on that with them. Like giving input, being creative on something that isn't mine, like having an outsider's perspective on something. And so it kind of organically grew from there. And I honestly, so the accident happened and I was uncertain that we would ever do anything again. And I wasn't, maybe this makes me a jaded asshole, but I wasn't in a hurry to jump back in a van again. I would only, there were certain parameters I would have looked for another band, but I also wasn't interested in, if I was going to step foot on stage again, it had to be with the Ghost Inside guys. Like even if it was only one time and then we decided to call it quits, for me, I would have to check that off the list first before I could even consider going to do something else with another band. So in my mind, I was like, I don't know when or if that'll ever happen again. And it presented the opportunity for me to kind of dive into the studio world a little bit more, because I figured, A, I'm going to need more income. B, I have a lot of time to kill. I better figure out something to do to kill that time so I don't go crazy, and B, hopefully make a little bit of extra income until we figure out when or if this will ever happen again. So it was an accidental, organic thing that I started off just as a way to just get ideas out of my head. And then I kind of realized this is kind of fun. Also pretty stressful and annoying at times, but mostly fun.
I think that's how we all feel about it. That encapsulates a very good. Yeah, I'm about to say that's a very good statement. That's a clip right there. I'm going to keep that.
Is
forever
that
in my heart?
Is that how you guys got into it too? Is it a similar thing?
I didn't have anybody so in the area where I grew up, I kind of came up on the back end of all the local bands doing the music I kind of liked. So I didn't really have anybody to work with. And so I was like, well, how can I do this without having other people around, And it started off just being I want watching people do guitar covers on YouTube or whatever. I'm like, how did they do that? And then then I downloaded Reaper, and then I figured out how to use my pod as an audio card. Then I started working at McDonald's whenever I was 15, so then I could get my first computer and a Focusrite Scarlett. And then very quickly I kind of realized I was I kind of really like doing this. I think I want to produce music, And so I was convinced high school Josh, my senior year, I was I'm going to mix metal records forever. And I was very wrong. I was very, very wrong.
Sure.
So, but yeah, it's, I feel that's how most people kind of start out.
At least of our generation, I feel like our, I think Simmons, I might be a few years. Josh, how old are you?
I'm 26.
Okay. So I'm the oldest guy here. And I feel like my age and younger, I feel like that is going to be forever going to be the most common way to get into it. Is I'm in a band. I want to get or I'm I like to do electronic music. I just want to get my ideas out. And then you realize I kind of like the technical side of this. I kind of controlling the computer. It would be fun to do this for other people. I feel like that's going to the most obvious way in is just wanting to do something for yourself. And then you realize that you actually love it more than just doing it for yourself.
I think the bottleneck is it starts as I just want to do this for myself. And then you realize that you're fucking bad. So then you're well, I need better people to do this. And I don't really want to do a band with these people. So maybe I should find good people that are in bands and then ask them for money. It's just I don't know. That's how it was for me. I was damn, I'm good, but I ain't that good. I should probably work with better people than me, that's just kind of how it goes. I think Lee had the same story where it was kind of the same thing. He was sort of in a band for a little bit, and then he started doing demos, and he was you know what, this is really cool. And then one thing led to another, and then he was working at Glow in the Dark, and that's just that's everybody's pipeline. It's just oh shit, I think I am somewhat interested in this just because I was trying to make demos for my band.
Yeah, Chris, you and Lee would get along really well.
Yeah,
Lee Rouse. I feel
never met him.
Really well.
Unfamiliar with him, but I would love to chat with him because that's a pretty cool story.
Yeah,
dude, he's the GOAT. I love him so much. He lives down here in Atlanta. So
sick.
Do you find yourself aimlessly stacking effects plugins trying to accomplish the sound you hear in your head? Well, do I have the answer for you? Safari Pedals offer a complete suite of unique effect plugins that are designed to give your productions a unique twist in a familiar package. Whether you need a distorted gated reverb like their Dirty Dog pedal or a Germanian fuzzbox like their Gorilla Drive, Safari Pedals will have your artist thinking twice about trying to haggle your fee. Use code HANGOUT at checkout to receive 20% off your order. That's HANGOUT at checkout to get 20% off your order at safaripedals.com.
But yeah, what was the biggest transition for you from going from like guitarist in a band to like I'm gonna do studio, and like how was that mental transition?
Pretty easy, because working on your own stuff can be pretty stressful.
You're right.
Because I add an extra like 5 layers of anxiety and stress to anything when it's my own stuff, which is something I just experienced, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little bit. But working on other people's stuff takes a couple layers of stress off for me. Obviously, there's the stress of like wanting to really deliver for the client you're working for. But the other side of it is at the end of the day, it's their art. Like, I just need to focus on what they want. You know, it's not about pleasing me at the end of the day. I can give my input, but at the end of the day, it's just what they want.
Yeah.
So it was a lot easier for me in a lot of ways.
That's been a huge thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately. I feel like a lot of music producers will end up in that mindset of like, oh, I have to convince the band to do this, because like they're imposing like their own vision for the song, which is fine. Like some producers get hired for that, right? You know, like you're not going to hire Max Martin and then he's going to be like, oh, we should do this chord progression. And you tell him no. Like you're not going to do that. All right. Especially how much of an investment that is. You know, you're not paying to tell Max Martin no. But like, not everybody's Max Martin. You know? And I think and like that's been something that I've been like really hyper focusing on. I feel like in certain situations you have to kind of do that because the artist just isn't good and like objectively not good.
Right.
But then like whenever you're working with capable people, you know, it's really cool being able to like sit back and be like, hey, like instead of telling them, I don't like that, maybe you should do this instead, being like, I think that you could come up with something better. And then just like letting them vibe for like 30 minutes. And then they're like, oh, how about this? And you're like, that's sick. You know? And that's been like a whole thing that it also like removes one layer of stress, you know, from the project, just being like, well, if they don't come up with it, you know, it's on them, but they're happy with both ideas, you know?
Right.
And so that's been something I've been focusing on a lot, is like, what can I do to get more out of people instead of what can I provide, you know?
Yeah. And I do think that that's a small learning curve, especially if you did get into it from being a band guy who started because you wanted to write your own stuff, is accepting that like it doesn't always have to be your idea. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like I will always give input, especially if a band has specifically said we want to hear your input. But it took me a minute to accept that like they don't have to take it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I can give the input, but my answer isn't always right. And that's something I've learned even with my own band, is like there are 5 people in the band plus a producer. Like if I pitch something, it doesn't mean it's always going to stick. I have to be okay with my answer not being the right one all the time. So that was a small learning curve, but I think it's easier for me to accept that my answer is not the right one when it's not my music. When it's my band, I'm like, what do you mean you don't like it? You know what I mean? But it's easier for me to accept it from a client, because I can just be like, okay, fair enough. This is your thing. You know, I'm here to kind of help you steer the ship, but ultimately you're the captain and I'm here to help you. You know, like I'm your right hand man in this process.
Yeah. Did you, I actually had a really good question for once, Drew. Typically he asked all the questions and I'm just here to like derail the conversation. And then he asked another question to get it back on track. Well, like, is there anything that you picked up from like the various producers that you've worked with that like stuck with you forever?
And that helped, like, especially in the beginning, like helped you get started as well. But like, yeah, across the board.
So a lot of it for me in the beginning was just workflow stuff. Like thinking back to like how would Will Putney like structure our day? Like how does he track guitars? Like what does it seem like he classifies as a good vocal take? Like a lot of it was just workflow stuff. How would Grant McFarlane and Carson Slovak, like, what was it like tracking a Texas record with them? Like how in depth were they tracking? You know, like how tight were they getting the guitars? Because they're fucking tight. You know, like I took a lot of that stuff away in the beginning. And it's only been like the last record that TGI did with Will Putney, and then the current one we've been working on with Dan Braunstein, where I've kind of just been trying to take mental notes of like the songwriting side of things. Like what is Will doing to these songs that we're bringing into him that are like, you know, when we finish them and bring them to him, we feel are like 90% of the way there, and then he like not good enough. Let's do this here and that there, and you're immediately you go, why the hell didn't I think of that? Like, you know. So I'm just trying to like make mental notes of like maybe things that seem small as far as songwriting, but like really at the end of the day are like making a gigantic difference in the whole thing. So like even just like you know, in metalcore, it's not uncommon for like a band to not stick to a key. You kind of, especially in our like the more hardcore side of things, I hate using that word, but like stuff can get pretty chromatic and kind of ugly, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we'll be like, instead of going there, let's just move that like down a fret so we keep it within a key. And then you listen to the whole song that way and you're like, yeah, the whole song is like so much easier to take in, you know, like trying to keep like basic music theory stuff in mind, which I'm like not classically trained or like fully trained in. I have a basic understanding because I took like a semester of music theory in high school, which is a fucking eternity ago at this point. But just trying to keep even just the basics of that in mind, like I feel like is a gigantic thing that gets greatly overlooked.
Yeah, my biggest problem with a lot of metal records is how the breakdown will happen, but then that note that they're riding on is not the root of the key.
Yes.
And I remember I brought that up to a band I was working with, and they were like, well, how are we going to do that? I was like, we could transpose the song so it fits on your guitar, or we could just use a pitch pedal. And they were like, all right, yeah, we'll go get pitch pedals. And it sounded so sick.
Sick. It makes a huge, like when you there's a part coming in and you're like, the music is leading you to go one way, but then it goes somewhere else. It's so jarring. It's so jarring. It makes such a big difference. And I feel like specifically in the metal world, like that gets greatly overlooked.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
for sure.
So you do your studio stuff. Oh, I would love to see you kind of go over what you ended up with your home studio. That's where I was going to go next.
Sure. So I am in the home studio now, and this is my third or fourth iteration of a home studio. When I started kind of getting into it before the accident, I was just working out of a little space in my parents' basement because I was still living at home. And then after the accident, my wife and I moved out into our own place, and I kind of built another iteration of the same basic studio in a basement setup. It was just a long empty room. I threw some panels up. I had a makeshift desk and some monitors, and that was that. And then my wife and I bought this place, and we bought it, had a completely unfinished garage, and basically just finished the walls that existed, and then did the whole room within a room kind of situation here. So like all of the walls are like 3 or 4 inches off of the existing walls that were here, and they're all double layered with drywall and all that. My biggest thing is I was moving into a neighborhood where we're like it's mostly older people. You know, I didn't want to be disturbing anybody by being in here making noise. So I was trying to make sure that I was much less worried about sound coming in, which obviously is a big deal as well, but I was more so worried about sound going out and pissing somebody off. So it's pretty heavily treated as far as like trying to soundproof the room. So I did that. Yeah. And I've been in here in this setup since it literally finished less than a week before the entire world shut down. It got finished like the first week of March in 2020. And I've just been living in here with it like this ever since then. slowly got panels up around the room. I still need to buy some more. I've been dreading that and putting it off because it's so freaking expensive, and it's like the least sexy investment you can put into your studio.
Oh, dude, okay, so
you can see my corner up here, not treated, definitely needs a trap.
Dude, like no one wants to spend money on that stuff. It makes such a big difference, but no one wants to spend that money.
Well, it sucks. And then like there's this one Discord I'm in, there's a really good mastering engineer in there. He goes by Nomograph Mastering. His name's Rory. And so I found out recently that he's actually like really big too. Like he's working with like Bleachers and Taylor Swift and Lana Del Rey and like
small things.
Just small things. And so then, I mean, like, first of all, like I trust him with my life beforehand, but then I was like, oh, like this guy's like doing a bunch of crazy stuff. And so when he moved to LA, like he started off just like tuning rooms and like setting them up, you know? And so like, if you ask him, like, how should I set up my room? He's like, don't put anything on the back wall, like where your speakers are. Put your speakers up against the wall. And then the first thing you do is get a cloud. Make sure it's at least 6 inches. And I'm like, a 6-inch deep cloud is not sold by anybody. You have to get it custom made by someone like GIK, or you build it yourself, which I'm not building this shit. I'm bad at it. I'm not Bob the Builder. And then on top of that, it's like so big that one piece is probably like a few $100s. And then if you ask him if you should get broadband panels for the walls, he goes, no, only get bass traps because they're thick enough. And it's like, okay, great. So now it's like treating a room went from like annoying to like insanely expensive and annoying real fast. Because now I'm like, I have like 6 broadband panels just like hanging out under our bed that no one wants to buy from me. And I'm like, I need to get rid of them because like my next studio build, I'm not going to use broadband panels. I'm only going to use bass traps. And then I'm on like the site, like planning it. And I'm like, great. Like this is, you know, a few $1,000s just for treatment.
Yeah.
And
but it sounds to me like this guy is working with like unlimited budgets on stuff.
Whoa.
He's working on Taylor Swift. And I just feel like you can't tell me that those other panels aren't doing anything. They're not making any difference. Come on now.
His point is that if instead of spending like say $600 on broadband panels, you're better off spending the $850 on bass traps. You know,
sure. I'll give you that.
Like,
I'll give you that.
So like that's his point. He's like, for young kids who don't have a ton of budget, like first get a good cloud and then start with the bass traps. And then later down the line, if you have to do little moves to tune the room, whatever, you could do it. But
then you start killing first reflection points with broadband panels and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And then he's like, you know, it's very like he tries to keep it as simple as possible.
I mean,
you know, which is pretty cool.
I back that part for sure.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I even back the cloud thing because I do have a cloud, but it's not big enough, and that's like my first thing where I'm like, I need to do that, but I also don't feel like spending the money. I have 3 GIK panels here. I really need to go like another 3 back that way, and then probably one more to the left and right to really have a cloud that's like properly sized. But I just I don't want to spend the money.
Where does the cloud start?
My head is literally at the tail end of it. Like it really should go back so that my sweet spot could be just a little bit bigger.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to say.
Just a little bit longer.
Your sweet spot, you kind of lean forward a little bit.
I do, and it sucks.
Because whenever we were doing the heirloom record at your house, to check stuff properly, I would have to like lean
it's
forward,
a pain in the ass. And I don't even know if I had everything hanging on the walls by that point either. And
no, you had the cloud, but it was I don't think the back wall, but I don't think you had the sides.
Yeah, and the room was like super because it's. I mean, I'm working with a little bouncy. It was really bad. It's much better now, and it still could be better because, like I said, I'm missing a few panels that I would really love to have. But yeah, it's the least sexy investment you can make for your studio, but my God, it makes a huge difference.
For sure.
You want some prime acoustic panels?
You know what?
I'll drop them off in Maryland on my way home.
You know what, bud? No,
they're still in the plastic.
That's a generous offer. I'm gonna have to respectfully decline, though. I think.
What's on the desk, Davis? What's on the desk?
What do you mean? What's on the desk?
What's on the desk? You were getting rid of some stuff. I don't know if you ever got rid of it.
So I have greatly downsized. So when I first moved into this space, and before the entire world caught on fire and everything started to suck even more than it already sucked. I had this grandiose dream of having a full on like full production studio in this space. So I had a ton of preamps and outboard gear, and I like ran a 150-foot snake down into my basement, was going to convert one half of my basement into a drum room. And then the world broke, and I only tracked drums down there one time. And the more the pandemic went on, the more I kind of started to change my workflow and my outlook on how I wanted to operate. And so basically I've just dwindled it down to a good vocal chain and a good DI for tracking guitars. And now I just go rent a room for drum tracking instead of doing it all here. Because the reality is one thing that changed for my living situation during the pandemic that I think changed for a lot of people we were talking about earlier is remote working. My wife now works remote from home all but one day a month. And so I can't track drums in my house because even if I treated the basement, it would still be kind of noisy. And she's upstairs on our second floor in her office taking meetings, and I can't be blasting her out in the middle of a meeting. And I also can't be stopping like the flow of a project because she's taking a meeting. Mm-hmm. So it became like not the most ideal working scenario. So I just said, screw it. I'm going to get rid of all the gear that should be making awesome music, being used to make great music. And it's just sitting here collecting dust. And I'm just going to keep exactly what I need. So I have a Heritage Audio HA73, which is just a 2-channel 1073 like channel strip thing. It's just the pre and then an EQ for each channel.
Nice.
And then it is awesome. It is my favorite. I've had a couple different 1073 clone deals, and it's my favorite one I've had. So
do you ever compare it to an AMS?
I have not, because I've not owned one of those.
And that's the thing. Everyone says AMS, they're just not worth it. Right. If you want the real thing, just buy a BAE, Yes.
And I had two BAE 500 series ones that also ripped. They were also very good.
Yeah, their 500 series is like one of the few 500 series 1073s that rip. We have the AMS ones at the one studio I work at, and they sound nothing like a 1073. And yeah, it's just like they're the same price. Like, why? It's weird.
Because they can put the Neve name on it. That's why.
Yeah.
That's the big red knob on it, baby.
But the Heritage Audio ones, I see them around sometimes, but that was like the first like vocal chain I used was a Heritage into either like a Slate Dragon or a Stay Level. And there's something about those that just rip.
Yeah, they're cool, man. Like I said, I had two of the BAE 1073 500s, and I also had the 500 version of this Heritage. And I actually tended to gravitate towards the Heritage. So that's when I got rid of all the 500 stuff. I do a little bit.
Yeah, that's kind of what I like about it is I would be able to like run it on the cleaner side, and then because a lot of times I don't want a ton of grit, like if I'm tracking like a really pretty pop song, but then I also don't want something like a 511 because that was the other option. And the 511 is just so clean. You're like, well, this is pointless. Why would I could just plug into my Apollo,
Exactly. So when I decided to size down, I just got rid of all the 500 stuff and some of the other pre's that I had and just got this thing. So I kept that, or I got this, and then I kept a distressor for vocal tracking.
There you go.
And then I just have a Creation Audio Labs MW1 DI, which is like my favorite guitar and bass DI I've ever had in my entire life. It's like unbelievably clean.
One of the coolest DIs.
I'm looking it up.
It's never awesome.
Heard of this.
It also is a reamp, and it's the first reamp box I've ever had where I didn't feel like I was losing gain coming out of the DAW into whatever I was plugging into. Like it feels very 1-to-1 still. I feel like all the radial ones I've ever used feel like I have to like jack the gain up almost.
Yeah, you have to like force more out on the out to get it to read right. Yeah.
Yep. And
is it the studio tool?
It is. Yes.
This is sick.
Yeah, it's really awesome.
It rules. I'd seen a couple stuff just researching DIs and reamp boxes back in the day, and then I finally experienced it. What's that?
Well, didn't Lance is the one that I heard talk about it.
Lance uses it now, and I think Lance uses it because of Will Putney, which is where I got to see it in use for the first time, was doing the last TGI record with Will, and it was just like the DIs sound the most clean and like pristine. Like it's like you just took your guitar and like put it in the computer with nothing in between.
That's very nice.
Yeah,
that's very nice. The only other like nice DI I ever used was the Avalon, the U5.
Those are cool too.
That thing,
they're cool.
Those rip for bass.
Yes, they are
the
very good for
on
bass.
That is crazy.
Yep.
And
I used a Little Labs that I really liked one time too.
The Red Eye?
Yes.
I had the Red Eye 3D for a little bit too, and that's also very cool. I did feel like the reamp portion of it still did that thing where you felt like you were like losing like 6 dB of gain coming out into your amp again. Like the only one that I've ever felt like I could plug into an amp and get the same result coming back out of the reamp. Like just going
that's
through,
very
it's
cool.
the only time I've ever felt like that.
It's the fact that it does both. That's what's the crazy part to
That's really cool.
The reamp side is the side that always lacks. I've never, like you said, I've never found anything that will do it where it feels one-to-one, where it's like, oh, me plugging into this amp and me going through this reamp box are the same thing.
Yep.
Have either of you guys reamped through a fuzz pedal?
I have not, actually.
So I just found something out. Years ago, I was helping my homie make like demos, right? And I was like, well, if you want, we could just like reamp the guitars, like track all the guitars and then rent the studio and then go there and then just reamp all of them. And he's like, no, I'll never reamp again. And I was like, why? And he was like, because our shit just sounded way different. Like it was like too clean. Like nothing sounded the same. And like, it just didn't work out. And I was like, yeah, whatever. He's full of shit, right? So that was in 2015 that he told me that. And last week, I'm like searching through this Discord for information on something. And I stumble across this message where this dude goes, yeah. So that's the whole issue with fuzz pedals, is that they're extremely like sensitive to long signal chains. So I guess some like rock producers back in the day would actually have a guitar that was literally just pick up directly to output jacks, specifically to go directly into a fuzz pedal, directly into an amp. And the idea is that if you're reamping through a fuzz pedal, it's just going to sound terrible. Because it's something. It actually blew my mind. I still have a hard time believing it to be real. But if numerous people with far more accolades than I will ever have are saying that it's all true, I'll just say it's true as well.
I mean, there's for sure got to be some truth to that, because I remember reading about like Angus Young recording with a cord that was like a foot long, like standing right next to his amp head and plugging into it to get like a better signal out of his guitar. So and obviously like the longer your cord, the more high end roll off you get and stuff like that. That is a thing, but that's just weird because when we did the last record with Will, like Will's thing is he loves fuzz pedals and like really fucked up distortions. And there were for sure parts that we tracked that he went back later and was like, we should have run that through a fuzz pedal and reamped through it. Now that I'm thinking about it, but he's also using this same reamp thing, and I wonder if it's just like older reamp boxes that like it's losing signal, so it's not hitting it as hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's another thing too. Is so like fuzz pedals in general are pretty primitive circuits, so they just tend to be more sensitive. But like if you have like an old school fuzz pedal and you try to reamp through it, it's just not going to be the same at all.
That's crazy.
But like, I mean, having a really nice like reamp box, especially he's probably like figuring out the gain staging and he's probably just adjusting it so it sounds right. But it's one of those things where like, if you took a snapshot of your rig and you're like, these are the sounds, and then tried to do that, it's just not the same. I guess I was texting him about that because I just found that out and I was blown away. And he was like, literally last night, I just saw a JHS video where like, apparently you're supposed to put your fuzz pedal before your tuner.
Really?
Out of principle. Yeah.
Now I need to go watch that video because I've never heard that before, but that's crazy.
Dude, I was completely blown. I got to ask my dad about it because he's a big guitar nerd as well.
Sure.
But that was like really crazy.
That's
to me.
crazy.
Yeah, I had no clue.
And lastly, monitor's desk. Any last little bits other than guitar, and you have your guitars, obviously, and your babies.
Bunch of guitars back there. But yeah, I've been on the Din Audio. I don't even know how you pronounce it. I have always say Din Audio, but Din Audio LYD 48s, I believe, is the model. They're like the 3-way monitor, and then I have the 9S subs, like their 9-inch sub or whatever. And honest, I want to upgrade just because I want to experience different. I just want to try different stuff. But that said, like these monitors have treated me very well. They've been pretty reliable. They translate really well.
I should have gotten those instead of my Focal Shape Twins. At the time, I didn't understand anything about like how speakers are made, and I didn't understand that a lot of Focals are just like clinically flawed, you know?
Yeah.
And after doing a lot more research, I realized in that same price range, the only speaker that actually competes with anything like twice the price are the LYD 48s.
They've been awesome. Truly. I don't even remember how I stumbled across them and made the decision to end up with them, but I've been pretty happy with them. They've really done the job for me. And then I've got an Apollo 16, which is overkill now that I'm not doing drums. At some point I may even sell it and swap it out for like an X4 or something. Like I really don't need much more than that. I got the 16 when I was going to try to do the all in-house thing. But I am pretty tied to the UAD world. I do love the like zero latency monitoring when you really need it. I don't use it all that often, but it is great to have when you need it. And I love having the extra DSP, and I really love like their 1176s and stuff I'm full on in the UAD world. Big fan of the UAD stuff. So I've got that, and I've got a satellite just for a little bit of extra horsepower when I really need to like load up on plugins, which I try not to do anymore, but when I need to, I have the horsepower to do it. And that's that. Like I have a couple patch bays that aren't really being, utilized the way that they could be anymore because I've downsized, but I've got it down to just the bare bones of what I like really need to make a record these days. Cause most people want to program drums because they don't want to spend money. So all I need is a vocal chain and a guitar DI. And if we ever decide to do drums, I just rent out a studio in Baltimore and call it a day.
Yeah. Yeah. What are you doing for the vocal chain?
It's you being a pop guy might judge me for this, but it's just an SM7B with a cloud lifter into the 1073 into the distressor and then in, and it just works every time.
It's the best.
especially for aggressive shit. Like it just gets it really does just get the job done.
Yeah, the SM7B, I feel like, I don't know, sometimes I'm even lukewarm on it, but like anytime there's like metal involved, it's definitely the move, especially through a 1073 and a distressor.
Yes, it just like works.
The perfect pair.
Yeah, and like for a room that is like I said, it's a little bit more lively than I wish it was. So I have like a makeshift vocal stand that I pull out, or a vocal booth that I pull out, because that back there, I don't know if you'll be able to see it in the video or not, but was supposed to be a vocal booth, and I just when the pandemic hit, I was just like, I'm not gonna bother, treating that because no one's ever gonna I don't know when people are gonna be able to come back into my house again. You know what I mean? So for the time being, I just have a portable vocal booth I set up that like knockdowns a little bit more reflections, but the SM7B like really helps with like it's super directional. It doesn't pick up a ton of room shit. Like I know that I'm 90% certain that the Eternal Blue record from Spirit Box was tracked in an untreated room in a house that they rented in Joshua Tree with an SM7B to fight off reject all the extra noise from the room. Like
there's a lot of albums that were done like that. Yeah, it's crazy. I've actually kind of thought about like picking one up again. For some reason, I sold mine. I don't know why I did that. I think at the time I was like, oh, I have better microphones. And like, I'm always working at the studio with really good treatment. And like, now it's not always like that. And so I've thought about going back to it. Cause like we just did like an Americana record, and this was like the first time I've ever felt like, man, this is almost like overwhelming me. Cause typically I'm like begging the artist to do more vocals, and they're like, no, it's fine. And I'm like, okay. But this time it was a female singer and a male singer. but it's not like a duet. There's no feature. They are both singing the entire time.
Good Lord.
And then they both did
it's like folk
so
music.
many layers. We have 39 vocal tracks. And so I used my Lewitt, and which rips. It hasn't sounded bad on a single person, but I did make the mistake of not having them back up for the doubles. So it's very, very sibilant. And I was like, this is one of those times where I wish I had like a ribbon mic, but it wouldn't sound good in that room using a ribbon mic because they're so sensitive to the room.
Yep.
So I was like, maybe I should have just done it on an SM7.
Well,
Olivia Rodrigo did it.
I mean, fucking Metallica's got an unlimited budget. James Hetfield tracks into an SM7. You know, like if it ain't broke, don't fix it, kind of deal.
Yeah.
Which is going to negate what I'm about to say is if you want to buy one again, they just came out with the SM7 DB, which has a cloud lifter thing built into it now, so you don't even need the cloud lifter anymore. So it exists.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at the price on that though. Did they raise the price for that? It's like $100.
It's like $500. It's actually a really good price. I thought it was going to be more like $600 or $650, but I believe it's $499, which
that's not bad at all.
I think is a bargain. Because at first I was like, I'll never buy it.
The SM7B was $300 or $350 on its own, and a cloud lifter is like $150. I mean, it's basically like buying that in a cloud lifter. You just get it all in one unit now.
I know when I bought my SM7, it was $399. Plus the cloud lifter, it's way more than the SM7 DB. Also, dumb name, but clever. I appreciate it.
It's a bit of a dad name, but I respect it.
It feels like a Chango meme.
You know what? The fucked up part is that it really does.
That was the first thing I thought of was when are they going to release the SMH7B?
Oh God, that's funny. So let's talk about some more current stuff, Davis. So band got back together, and by got back together, I mean just started playing shows again. I had the pleasure to be at that one. I was glad to see you and hang out and see a bunch of people in LA. That was really fun.
That was a special one for sure.
It was a special one. It was super cool. And so after that, you guys kind of slowly dipped your toe back into the touring world. And then it was funny. I think I told you this. I was like, yeah, man. So what's the first tour back going to be? And you were like, I don't know. We'll probably take it easy and do a headliner or something. And then it's Under Oath. And then I was like, oh, okay. So just like the biggest possible option, basically.
Yeah. Things have worked out a little bit different than I imagined.
What the plan was. Yeah.
I mean, when we booked that first show back in 2019, like there were no other plans to do other stuff. We'd gotten offers to do other things, but we hadn't accepted any of them because we had to make sure that we could even physically play a show before we went past that. So, we played the first show back in July of 2019, and then we played a festival in Australia in January of 2020, and then everybody knows what happened in 2020. So our comeback process got halted again because of the pandemic. So we probably would have been back to doing this stuff a little bit sooner had the pandemic not come around, but our kind of reintroduction to the world kind of just got slowed down a bit. So 2021 we played 5 shows, when shows finally came back in the late summer, early fall of 2021.
The festival shows, like hot spots that you did basically.
Yep. And then in 2022 we did we went to Europe and did some festival stuff that we had originally agreed to do in 2020 and just kept getting pushed back. Mm-hmm. We did Brixton Academy in the UK, which is like a big like bucket list moment for a lot of bands.
Yeah, bro, that's huge.
It was unreal. And then we did Download Festival, and we headlined a festival in Germany called Full Force, which is like a 25,000 capacity festival. It was unreal. We had fucking fireworks. Never again in my life will we have fireworks. We had fireworks. Like that's
bro,
like
the video from that show is like, is this the same band?
I know
the drone shot from the top was just crazy.
It was nuts. It was everything I had ever dreamed of doing in a band and more. So that may never happen again. I'm glad I got to experience it one time. So that was awesome. And then our good buddies in A Day to Remember, kind of at that point we hadn't got back in a bus yet.
Yeah.
We were flying to shows, taking trains to shows, driving to shows, all of that stuff. And A Day to Remember hit us up and they were like, hey, we're going to do this tour in the summer of 2022. We know you guys can't really tour full time again. But you guys can pick a handful of dates on this tour that makes sense for you guys. We would love to have you on whatever you're available to do. And basically we ended up taking 2 consecutive weekends. We did Friday, Saturday, Sunday, took Monday through Thursday off, did Friday, Saturday, Sunday again. And the drives, much like Warped Tour, were far enough that it made the most sense for us to get a bus.
Mm-hmm.
So they created an opportunity for us to kind of test the waters on getting in a bus again, because that was really the only thing holding us back from touring. We originally
I feel like that must have been really hard.
It was easier for some of us than others. And it really, like, we had already tossed around the idea of doing tours where those who weren't ready to get back in a bus could just fly. And then this fell in our laps and we're like, all right, well, we'll just give it a shot. And really all of us got back in the bus the first night, except for Vigil. He needed a couple days and he flew for the first 3 shows and just met us at the shows. And then he rode on the bus for a day drive when he didn't have to get in his bunk and like try to fall asleep and stuff, so he could at least be awake to I don't know. It made him feel more comfortable that way.
Well,
and
I mean,
totally understandably so.
Yeah,
because I
totally get that.
Yeah,
like whenever the accident happened, like you guys were all sleeping, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I feel like that has to be probably the most traumatic way to get into one of the most awful accidents.
Yes.
You know, so I can see how he would want to be awake and, you know, like seeing what's going on outside of the bus.
It was exactly that.
Yeah.
And at some point in the drive, he was like, well, I'm just going to go lay on my bunk for a second and just kind of try to like start the process of like figuring out what this anxiety is and how to process it. And he like laid there for a second and then unintentionally fell asleep. And then he woke up and came out. I was like, I just fell asleep. I guess I can go on tour. And we're like, book the tour. You know what I mean? Like trying to jump on it before he could change his mind. So you know, unintentionally, the A Day to Remember guys are like exactly why we're back to being able to do this. They created an opportunity that, like, really at the end of the day was probably more inconvenient for them than anything to have us on, like, to have a band come in and out on random shows, like, really fucks up the schedule. And like on top of that, we're like bringing in lights and gear that they don't typically have to account for like 90% of the tour. But they did it for us so that we could be there with them because they're our friends, but B, create an opportunity for us to try to like figure out how to get back to doing this again. So they are largely to thank for us doing this again. Realistically,
shout out to ADTR and the whole crew. Like, they're I know they've been like real ones for you guys, kind of, and like Jeremy and has been a real one to Vigil, and like especially even before, like with the songwriting stuff and all that kind of stuff. And I know him and Vigil have like this really strong connection as well. But like, you know, that band and you guys are like the homies, man. It's been really cool to see the love right there. I mean, and I got to see you guys play.
I've been seeing the Ghost Inside tour with A Day to Remember since I was a wee lad. You know, I think I started listening like right whenever like Returners came out, and I feel like for as long as I could remember, it was always like that. So it's kind of cool that was the same thing that, you know, got you guys back into it.
Yeah, they've been really, really, really good for us, and been probably some of our biggest cheerleaders to get back to this. When we did that comeback show in LA, they played a festival in Montreal the day before our comeback show, and they all took a red-eye flight overnight to LA to come be there for our first show back.
Wow. That is so cool.
Yeah, they are all genuinely very awesome people. So very, very thankful for them. Very thankful that they like were willing to give us that opportunity to like get back out there again. But then since then, we spent most of this year touring. We did Europe twice. We did UK and headlined a festival called the Empiricon Festival in the spring. And then we went back for summer festivals, and then went right from summer festivals in Europe into the co-headline tour with Under Oath that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Which was like absolutely unreal. Under Oath's been one of my favorite bands.
Bucket list moment, man. I know me and you had this whole conversation in like 2019. Or maybe even 2018 or 2017 when me and you first met. It was like, Under Oath, the bucket list band. Kind of everybody's bucket list band if you came up in the scene when we did.
Yes.
So like, I'm sure getting to tour with them fine. I don't know if you ever guys ever got to. Did you? You never did at that point because they were already broken up by then, right?
Yep, that's right. Yeah, I couldn't believe that we were getting the phone call to do that when it came in. It was
that's super cool.
And I will tell you that they are some of the coolest. Day one of that tour felt like we had known them our entire lives. Like they are just the nicest guys on the planet. They're the best. It was the best experience I could have ever asked for to be our first North American tour back.
That's crazy. I did enjoy the little bit of content that you and Chris Dudley did together too. Like just like the cool little conversations things. Like I thought that was really cool. Also kind of introduced like each other's fans to each other, because I feel like there could have been a divide there somehow. And like I thought that was a really interesting way to do that.
You know what I feel like I discovered like a quarter of the way through that tour is I think there is more crossover from our fan base to them than there is from their fan base to us. Because I feel like anybody who is like into the Ghost Inside also probably grew up listening to bands like Under Oath and then found the heavier side of the genre. And I think it's very unlikely that people who just go to a show for Under Oath also give a shit about the Ghost Inside.
So
I remember. I think there's more crossover from our side to theirs, which is totally fine because the tour worked out really well. Like it didn't feel like either band was carrying more weight than the other. Like people stayed to watch both bands every night, but I did feel like I noticed more people who looked like they probably would more normally be at a show of ours, like singing along to their songs than the other way around, if that makes sense.
That definitely makes sense. I mean, Under Oath was like one of the first like post-hardcore bands I got into. You know, it was like them and like A Day to Remember, and like that was like all I listened to. I listened to For Those Who Have Heart and They're Only Chasing Safety on repeat for like years.
Huge records. I mean, both of those records, those were records that like blew the doors off for bands like us and other bands in our world. To like, it gave us a wider lane to like kind of walk through and created more opportunity. Because I mean, Under Oath has 2 gold records. A Day to Remember has like some platinum singles and gold records and stuff. Like before both of those bands, like the ceiling for this genre was pretty low. You know, and they definitely proved that bands in this world can be more than just a VFW hall. And there's nothing wrong with that either. You know, but it created an opportunity for bands in our world to expand and go much larger than I think most people would ever imagine possible within our genre.
I think a lot of fans don't understand just how low the margins are whenever you're in a band.
Yes.
And so they'll be like, oh, they're too big or whatever. And it's like, hey, they're almost at the point where they're going to be able to retire one day and have health insurance. Like that's sick. You know, like you should be rooting for that, you know?
Yes.
And that's it. I don't know. It's really cool seeing it. It's still insane watching Bring Me the Horizon like do their thing. Cause I remember when Suicide Season came out and that record like blew my mind. I was like, man, these guys are so heavy. And
me
then
and Chris talk about
like,
them.
It just kept going and going, and they got bigger and bigger, and now they're on like New Music Friday and shit. And like,
but
they're so cool.
They've never been scared to just do whatever they want. And I wish more bands were willing to just do whatever they want and not be scared of doing whatever they want. You know, and
I feel like a lot of bands end up doing this thing where they're like, we need to like hit a broader audience, but then they kind of like do it the safe way, and it comes off as like not authentic. You know, and Bring Me the Horizon was just like, no, if we're going to do it, we're just going to do it the way we want to. And therefore it comes off as authentic and like it connects better, you know?
Yep. You don't see it as much anymore with Bring Me because they've been so open with like, we're just going to do whatever we want. We don't really care what anyone thinks, that people don't really get, you know, oh, they sold out. You know, you don't see that shit as much about them anymore. But even when it like, you know, Sempiternal came, and then there was
That's
the Spirit, and then there was Amo. Like they got shit for Amo. I love Amo.
I love
my favorite
record.
album by them.
I have it on vinyl.
It's my favorite album.
It's so good, and like I've always been like, if you don't like it, don't listen to it. Their other records didn't disappear because they put out Amo. You know what I mean? Like, it would be way more insincere for them to just rewrite Suicide Season because
for sure
that's what people want them to do. You know what I mean? Like, I will, even if I don't like a record, I will always give a band respect if I can tell that they're just doing what they're stoked on.
Yeah, what they want to do. Yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah. Also, shout out Dan Lancaster.
Dude, legend.
For one of the fattest mixes.
I know. Everything about that album is really, really cool. And it's just like, at the time, like that came out and then some people like tried to do that thing and they just couldn't nail it, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a really, really cool album. But for some reason, like, that one got so much hate. I just don't get it.
I mean, it's pretty poppy by comparison.
It's not that much different than That's the Spirit, though.
It's really not. It's really not. Which is exactly what I was gonna say. And people just love to be mad about shit, man. And that's why, like, I just don't care anymore. You know, like, we put out a single earlier this year that I think a lot of people would classify as being more rock or whatever. It's still heavy.
I love that song.
When we put it out, I just didn't read comments. I still haven't gone to read comments anywhere because I just don't care. I like the song. Yeah. We as a band like the song. I hope people like it, but like I'm not gonna write songs that we're not stoked on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
You know, like obviously I want people to like it, you know, but I'm not going to change or lobby to change what the five of us like to try to fit what other people are expecting us to do. I just want to write songs that we want to play, that we want to hear, because otherwise it's just BS. I just want to write songs that I enjoy.
Well, that's a good transition into where we're currently at, which is you just spent some time working with one of my current favorite producers, as well as yours, I would think, Chris, right? And I think Josh also agrees. Yeah. And as I was saying, I think Josh also agrees with us as well, that Dan Braunstein is probably one of the transcendent producers to come out of the scene.
Oh,
we lost him again.
Oh, we lost him. I'll finish that.
Sorry.
He feels like he is the next generation.
Oh, 100%.
I agree with that. Yeah. Dan is hands down my favorite producer I've ever worked with. I've been very fortunate to have the chance to work with a ton of great people. Now, I've worked with Putney twice. I've worked with Grant and Carson at Atrium a bunch of times now. I got to work with Zeus. I've worked with a bunch of really awesome people. Dan is the GOAT, though. He really is. He's super laid back. He's got really great ideas. At least for us, it seemed like he really understood the DNA of the band, but he also understood where our head was at with the band and where we want to go. Yeah. You know, he understood that we weren't trying to write Returners Part 2.
I was about to bring that up. Like it's probably pretty easy to like run into people who just kind of assume like, oh, I've been listening to this band for years, so I have to make it sound like one of these records.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. That happens a lot. We've been working on this record in a very different way for us. In the past, we would just pick like, we're going to go do this record with Andrew Wade, you know, and we would do every song with Andrew Wade and Jeremy. And that was that. It was just the people in the band, Andrew Wade and Jeremy McKinnon, no other outside input. And the last record that we did with Putney was, we're going to do this record with Putney and we're going to have Jeremy in to help with some songwriting and some vocal production stuff. It was only those guys. And this time around, starting back in like last December, it was like, well, let's go do some writing sessions with other producers and just see what they bring to the table. And so we worked with Dan. I think Dan was actually the first guy that we worked with, and actually why we ended up doing the record, having him like produce and engineer the record. But we worked with Dan. We worked with Josh Gilbert and Joseph McQueen. Worked with Tyler Smith. Tyler Smith helped out with Earn It, That was the single we put out earlier this year. We worked with John Lundeen. We worked with Eric Ron. Worked with Cody from Wage War. Worked with Andrew Wade for a song. Worked with Grant and Carson. So we worked with a lot of people. And I think it actually, at first, it was a little overwhelming because it started to feel, in the early stages of it, started to feel like it was kind of all over the place because you're getting perspectives from so many different people.
Yeah.
That it just felt a little chaotic at times. But as the pile has grown and we've gotten more songs, it started to kind of rein itself in, and now it actually feels pretty cohesive, which is really weird to think about, because last December when I got the first, I had to miss some writing sessions, and when I got the first pile of songs, it's like, how the fuck do these songs relate to each other in any way? Like, what is happening here? Both musically and lyrically, like, what? I don't understand this. But now that we have what feels like potentially a record's worth of song, it all totally makes sense. It's really bizarre, but I feel like there's a lot more that we're bringing to the table as far as like different vibes and different approaches to songs and different approaches to like lyrical content and stuff. It all still feels very true to the band, especially on the lyric side of things. Like, the band will never not have lyrical things about real life shit and like overcoming adversities and stuff. Like, that's just it wouldn't be the band
of the band,
right? Yeah. It wouldn't be the band if that wasn't what the band was standing for. And I think that realistically, at the end of the day, that is the most important piece to the puzzle with this band. But we definitely we're trying some new stuff, because we started off trying to write a Chrono Part 2 or whatever, and it just felt so forced and dated, and it didn't feel authentic. You could tell that we were trying to redo something that's already been done. It felt rehashed, and the reality is like, that record's been done.
Like you were covering yourself.
Yes, it's like Returners is a snapshot of 2008 or 2009, whenever that record came out. Like, we can't live in that moment again. I wasn't even in the band for that, so I really can't live in that moment again. And so we were just like, all right, screw that, stop. And that's exactly what I was saying, is like, stop trying to write the record that people say they want us to write. I think what's more important is for us to just write songs that we're stoked on, that we are authentically into, and just go from there. Like, I don't know. I am the most stoked on this collection of songs we have now than I've ever been on anything that any of my bands have ever released.
So how are you guys doing all of it? Like, so you're working on these songs with a bunch of other people. Are you like cutting drums with other people? Are you like cutting guitars with other people? Or like you just going to one place and then like doing everything?
So I think it's like the songwriting is all with everybody, and production is separate. Production and final tracking is separate. Is that kind of the goal?
Yeah. So these were all just songwriting sessions, like getting in a room with people and just like hashing out ideas with people.
You did it like a pop record.
Essentially, and that's becoming more acceptable now in our world. For some reason, it was like really taboo to like have any sort of outside input on what you were doing before. I don't know why.
They don't even write their own songs.
Right. It's like, hey, guess what? Guess what, guys? Co-writing doesn't mean you're not writing your songs. It just means you're allowing somebody into your creative process, which, guess what, can make your songs better. Who cares?
Yeah. What people don't understand is that a co-writing credit could be as much as being handed a song, or as little as being like, should I say the there, or should I say and
exactly. Exactly that. Exactly that. And there is a song on this record that it is exactly that. We went in and me, Andrew, and Vigil went in and started a song with two producers, and musically at the time was basically all me and Andrew writing the music, and lyrically was essentially all Vigil. The only thing the producers contributed in a big way was a melody for the chorus. And then when we brought things back and we were working on it recently with Dan to see if we are actually at the point of having a record, we decided we're not too in love with that chorus anymore. and we changed the chorus. We brought in a different part that was like almost like a post-chorus thing that became the chorus. It's a little bit catchier than what was there before. But the thing is like those guys will still get credit because they sat in the room and like fussed through me and Andrew figuring out the guitar parts and like, it did exactly like, hey, should I say the or then or whatever, like you were just saying, Josh, like those guys, while they didn't technically contribute music parts and the chorus that they wrote is gone, they still did sit in there and like work through those ideas with us. So they'll get songwriting credit.
Because at the end of the day, if they weren't there for that, then you might not have ended up in the same destination.
Exactly that. And so like that, but that goes to your point of like, they may not technically have anything that came from their head directly into the song, but they're still going to get songwriting credit. And I think that's like fully what a lot of people don't understand about co-writing.
Yeah.
So 100%.
Yeah. But this definitely was done, I guess, in a little bit more of a pop or like country style of co-writing situation. For sure. For sure. Way different than anything we have done in the past.
I've not heard of many bands doing that really outside of maybe Bring Me and ADTR.
Bring Me does it. A Day to Remember does it. Wage War does it. Falling in Reverse.
I know. Yeah, that's true.
Falling in Reverse does Prevail does it. Like it's happening and it's starting to be talked about more. I just don't know why it's such a taboo. I think it's because the average person hears co-write and assumes the songs are being written for them, and like that couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah, that's really not what it is at all.
All the bands that have people feeding them songs don't even have credits up because they
that's
the credits. So
right.
Yeah, it's just kind of
that's
true. Even then, like even if like someone did just hand you a song and like if it sounds better with you singing it, then there's nothing wrong with singing it. Like I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, there's something to be said for that too.
I just don't get the whole thing.
So you writing all these songs, tracking guitars for that. So how was that? You mentioned it. We had a whole conversation about it before, but I want you to talk about it, Josh.
Yeah. So that was very fun. So in this process of like basically now, we've decided to just go back with Dan and kind of work through all of the songs and get everything ready. Like while we're reworking stuff, finalizing ideas and stuff, just kind of getting like more close to being finalized album ready takes on everything. So that required me to go back and retrack guitar and bass on basically everything. Pretty much rhythms on every song. Some songs we were able to go in and like leads would be tracked well enough to keep. So there's some leads that are from demos and writing sessions that are still around. In some cases I would have to retrack stuff, but essentially so that Dan could focus on vocal stuff with Vigil, because we had a pretty small amount of time to try to get a lot of stuff done. We only had like 2.5-3 weeks to basically do our best to get it as close as possible to finishing a record. The only way to do that was for me to sit in a room by myself and track guitars all day. And so we spent the first 10 days we had with Dan tracking in Andrew's house. So he was set up in a room with Vigil with a mic and tracking vocals all day long. And I was in Andrew's home studio setup with a pair of headphones and in an Apollo interface and my laptop tracking all day. It was not the most fun experience, but it was the only way to get it done in the amount of time we had. So
clocking in,
exactly,
doing my time
all day. I was last person tracking every day, first person tracking in the morning. It was not awesome. But the reality is like no one could really help me, tracking in headphones. No one could even really sit there and keep me company. But it was as stressful as it was. I feel like when this record is done, it's going to make it feel 10 times more rewarding. The only real issue is that Andrew decided that we needed 6 different tunings on the record. So that created all sorts of issues. And then our guitars have been toured to death this year and our tech couldn't come into town. So the Evertune was not cooperating with me completely. So that was a whole other thing. So, we had some technical issues we had to overcome in the process, which slowed everything down. But I think we got it done. I feel pretty confident in how everything turned out at the end of the day. It was just, I expected it to be a 4 or 5 day process that turned into more of like a week and a half of me sitting in a room by myself, stressing over, is that chord out of tune? I think I can play that part a little bit better, and not only am I having to, learn stuff that I didn't write in some cases on the spot and then track it, but then also having to be the guy doing like the quality control on it in real time also. So that added, a couple extra layers of stress that I don't necessarily love. But again, it's like, it just had to be done. So that's what we did.
For sure. Yeah. Was there anything major that you learned from and this can kind of encapsulate the whole thing, but it's like, is there anything major that you learned from either working with Dan or from yourself, from just like tracking a bunch of guitars? Because I feel like you can't do that much guitar tracking and not learn something or get incrementally better.
Well, the main thing is, and probably the least exciting one, is he works in Pro Tools. I don't normally work in Pro Tools outside of drum editing. And so I just had to work in Pro Tools. So it forced me to learn Pro Tools a little bit better than I learned it, just so I could work a little bit faster.
Yeah.
But the other thing is like Dan, I really appreciate this about Dan. Dan is not precious about a lot of things. So like there's a song in F and I had a guitar tuned in G and I didn't have strings heavy enough to get the guitar into G or into F. So Dan's like, yeah, just use the drop pedal. Like whatever, just use the drop pedal. It's fine. I track stuff like that all the time. It's like I will track an entire song and just punch like 1 or 2 notes in here and there with the drop pedal all the time. No one will ever. He's like, I'll track a song with 3 different guitars tracked at different points. No one ever notices. He did
that with the Spirit Box records a bunch, I think.
Oh yeah. There's parts where they just turn on the pitch shift for a note in a Spirit Box riff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. just to get exactly what we were talking about earlier, Josh, just to keep a part in key.
Yeah. It just makes sense.
And so I learned to stop being so precious about stuff. Like even with editing stuff, like I got to have Dan track me for like 1.5 songs. Like when we moved out of Andrew's house and into the studio where we were tracking drums, I had 1.5 songs of guitar left to do, and Dan tracked me. And watching him be like, oh, we need a better chug in this spot. And like me, I would just be like, okay, let me track one real quick. He's like, no, I'll just steal it from right here. Like, I'll just move it over, just copy it over, which seems like a no brainer, but he's just like way less precious about stuff. And he's more about like, well, what's the overall vibe of the song? If you don't notice that you stole a chug from like 2 beats before, but it sounds good, like who cares? Just do that. Do whatever the path of least resistance is that doesn't ruin the vibe of the song. Just go with that. Whereas I'm a perfectionist. Everything's got to be right, and it's got to be like I try not to copy and paste too much stuff. I will, obviously, but he's just like, nah, dude. Let's just whatever's easier. Let's just get it done. Copy and paste. Done.
Well, this gets us into a really good moving into the last segment, I think, of the podcast, last couple segments of the podcast. Chris, what is something that you've been really stoked on production wise, right? Now that you've done, like
that it
could be that you've done, or that you've learned, or that you've seen, or that you've tried. You know what I mean? Like we've learned of people using Soothe in cool ways, using Spectre in cool ways. It can be like a guitar tuning. It can be whatever.
Dan, I've seen people use Spiff for like drum stuff, obviously to like add impact, like you would normally use for any transient designing stuff on drums. Dan was using it to remove spittiness and like unneeded sibilance from Vigil's vocals, and
that is one of the coolest things I've ever heard.
I had never thought about using it for that purpose, and then he was doing the thing where you can hit the delta button, you hear what it's removing, and I was like, oh my god, why didn't I know this sooner? And that like I feel like there have been so many times where I've made a vocalist redo what is an otherwise like basically perfect take, but there's like it's like too spitty or something, where I could just be like, nah, that's great, let me just clean it up, and it would have been totally fine. And so that for me was the biggest like mind explosion moment for me, is like that's a plugin that I thought of more so as like something to enhance your drums can also like totally totally like level up your vocal takes as well.
Yeah, that's like the first time I really heard about Soothe was when my friend Ryan was telling me about that. Specifically to like clean up vocal takes. And I was like, that's genius. That's actually genius. I think I need that.
Yeah, it's super cool. So I'm definitely going to be utilizing that more moving forward.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's really sick. The last little thing that we'll ask, go ahead and pull up your Spotify. We're going to find some new music here. Chris, I know you get into really bad times of not listening to some music sometimes.
Yeah.
But what's something that you've been listening to? I'm going to ask you for two things. So what's something that you've been listening to that you've been really stoked on? Can be new, can be old, can be whatever. And what's something that you find underrated?
Well, I'll tell you what I've been listening to that is old, that is for some reason hitting way more for me now than it did when it first came out, is the two most recent Architects records. I enjoyed them when they came out, and then I didn't listen to them for a while, and out of nowhere, like the chorus has just been getting stuck in my head. So I've been jamming those a lot. And the newest Motionless record is unbelievable. The newest Motionless in White record is the closest to a perfect like modern metalcore hard rock record that I think any band in our genre has put out in the past year or two. It is fucking good.
I'll have to check that one out. What do you think is something that's underrated, that you think people are underrating, or that is massively underrated, that you think people need to be listening to or check out more?
That's a hard one. It
could be a band it could be anything.
Well, I may be biased because we worked on this together, but Heirloom, I think people might be sleeping on Heirloom a little bit.
I think you're right. You're right.
I mean, like I said, I could be biased because they're very good friends of ours, and I love them big time. Like they're just the best. But I don't know if anybody, like, I don't know any other bands that are working maybe as hard as they are either. You know, like, I feel like they
work so hard.
They really do.
Oh my gosh, they really do. Like, just their entire like willingness to just front every bit of money to go to LA and do that whole side of things. The everybody willing to come up and work with you for that EP that we did together. And yeah, dude, you're right. They really are working their asses off.
They're all in. They really are. And I feel like that's not something you see from bands as often anymore. Like the Hostile guys are also like, they're also killing it.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I feel like they're going at it in a little bit of a different way. And I'm not even sure that they're going at it in a way to try to do it full time, like the way they used to be anymore. I'm not sure where they're at with it, but I feel like Heirloom is just like, they're just all in, like we're going to play shows all the time. We're going to keep writing music. We're going to constantly be doing everything we can to put out new music. We're going to go work with people who we feel can help us elevate our music. They're all in.
Shouts to the homies. They are working really hard, and I think they will have their time. They will get the love that they deserve. We're already writing new stuff.
But that's exactly my point. That's how it should be.
They just put out a record. Kevin sent me like 4 songs like the other day of like,
and that's how it should be.
Of riffs. Yeah,
that's what most bands of their size are not thinking about. And I'll even admit, like, bands like the Ghost Inside are like not always. You should always actively be writing. If this record is done, in a month or two from now, we should already be working on the next one, and it won't come out for a few years. But we should be working on it now. Like, we are notoriously bad at waiting until we need to be working on a record. Like in the label's eyes, exactly until it's almost too late. Like, we are notoriously bad at that. So Heirloom's doing it right, and the Ghost Inside should learn from Heirloom. Is what I'm saying.
Clip it, baby.
Done.
Chris, why don't you tell people where they can follow you on all socials and check you out. I want to give a special shout out to the Chris's Twitch community that I am also a part of. They show a lot of love and they put up with your erratic stream schedule.
They certainly do.
But yeah, tell people where people can find you.
You can find me on Instagram. It's just Chris_TGI. And on Twitch, Chris Davis, twitch.tv/Chris Davis TGI.
Yeah. And you got a Discord and stuff like that. You can find all that info, I believe, on your Instagram.
Yep. There's a link in my bio that'll give you all that kind of stuff. Yep.
Yeah. So if you want to catch him on Twitch, he normally does a pretty good job of posting in the Discord of when he's going live because his schedule is kind of erratic. Hopefully we can get back to a more regular thing now.
Yeah. Now that we're done touring for the year, it should get back to a more regular schedule here soon. Probably starting again next week.
Yeah. Well, bro, thank you so much for coming and hanging with us today, Chris. It's been a long time coming and we got it. We did it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, this was fun. We should definitely do it again.
I agree.
Yeah, we should definitely do it again. Maybe when there's a record out or something.
Yeah, easy.
Yeah, sick. Josh, thanks for being here and talking with me and Chris. I'm asking him questions that I would have never asked. And
anytime, dude.
And listener, thanks for listening. We'll see you guys next week.